Melee weapons in Fortnite Save the World are some of the strongest weapons in the entire game. You can eliminate hordes of enemies, solo mini-bosses, and do tons of damage so long as you have the right build. And that's basically what this video is about. You might be familiar with my old Best Ninja Loadouts video, and that is from 2019. And while it's not strictly outdated, there are some things that have changed, and so I've decided to re-record this video and give you a fresh take. And on top of that video being 3 years old, the recording that you're about to listen to after this intro was recorded about 3 months ago. I've been putting off this project for a while, so when the mood shifts in a second, you know why. It would be nice to have a new take on this because a lot has changed. Our power level has changed. Luna got nerfed, but is still amazing. Totally Rockin' Out exists and is just not existent in this video. And I'm older, I'm wiser, and I wanted just to clarify a lot of the new stuff that has come to the game. For example, tons of new ninjas have been added to the game, but there aren't really a ton that seriously shook up the game. And I think that doesn't change much. That's why I put off this video, but I wanted to focus on a couple of those. So let's talk about what we're going to be discussing here. I'm going to be helping you build the quote-unquote best loadouts. Now, there is no one true best loadout. In fact, the trickiness with that is not necessarily the heroes, it's the weapons. There are weapons in the game, like here's a bugged weapon, I'll link to this video down below. Founder's Nightcleave, you can't get this anymore. 4x attack speed is not possible, but with this insane 0.18 attack speed plus Paleo Luna, your damage output is ludicrous. I will link to that video down below. It has its own video. This weapon is nuts. But in a more realistic scenario, you might be running a weapon like the Stormblade Crit Explosions, which that 6th perk did not exist when I recorded my other video either. Throw Whiteout Fiona in the lead with Totally Rockin' Out active, and you are exploding constantly. That out damages the Nightcleave. And we haven't even talked about the Storm King's Ravager, which you can see I run it in 3 different ways because it's that strong. I run it for physical, just for normal loadouts to take out smokescreen mini bosses, because they never have an element, so hot tip for you there. Or if I'm running Luna, triple attack speed is amazing because she buffs your damage based on attack speed. We'll get to all that later. If you're not running Luna, if you're just running Assassin Sarah on the lead, Deadly Blade Crash, you might want to crit build on your Ravager. So to backpedal a little bit here, calm down. What I'm talking about today is the formation of the best loadout. There is no one true answer. There are way too many options. For example, I'm going to continue on just by cutting out a couple of the heroes that I won't be talking about here. Lynx Cassandra and Stoneheart Farah are the 2 ninjas that buff range weapon damage to some extent. Every other ninja in the game, to my knowledge, you can correct me if I'm wrong, every ninja in the game either buffs melee damage or some form of ninja ability or speed or something simple like that. You know, Phoenix, Wildlife exists now. But these 2 have their own videos. So Lynx is super prominent in the Mythic Storm King, also didn't exist with my old video. That video will be linked down below. That also gets into hardware buffs. This extends into melee territory, but Guardian Bowl is a thing that exists and Tank Penny is a thing that exists. They both buff hardware damage. That's super useful in the Storm King fight. They're not ninjas though, so it's out of the scope of this. And Stoneheart Farah, again, she is her own world. She has her own video. Link to that down below if you guys want to buff bows. We're going to be talking mostly about melees, and not just melees, but really swords. Swords are the only really good melee type. There are edge cases for axes and scythes and everything in the game, but swords are really what we're going to be focusing on here today, and that's how I'm trying to dial this video in and make this as understandable as possible. So I have favorited some key picks here that will hopefully dial in this video. First and foremost, we're going to go right to left here. Whiteout Fiona. She buffs the crit rating of swords, axes, and scythes by 15. Crit rating and crit chance are not the same thing. I'm about to move a very white screen onto here, so if you're in a dark room, flashbang warning. This is a chart that I've been referring to for years. It basically shows that 15 crit rating is really 0.175 crit chance, and that's important for this reason right here. So her 15 crit rating is going to combine with whatever crit rating perk you have. So if I'm running the Storm King's Ravager, you need to add up the 15 crit rating from her and the 30 crit rating from the Ravager. So because of the way crit rating works, it's not like her 17.5% would make this a 60% crit chance. In fact, not at all. You'd have to combine her 15 plus the added 30 crit rating, so that would bring it all the way to 45. It would actually only buff it by 35.5% chance, which would bring it to a 50.5% crit chance on the the Ravager. That is important to understand if you're going to be running Whiteout Fiona. It might not be that important though. I think it's important to understand it, but frankly, if you just put her in support, you'll crit more often. It only has to be as simple as that. And if you're going to be running Whiteout Fiona in support or even in the lead, you're going to want Deadly Blade Crash. Her damage output is insane. Basically, she makes it so that when you crit an enemy, it snares them and applies affliction damage, which is a huge percent. 37% of your damage dealt over 3 seconds is a lot. And in the lead, her damage actually is very, very close to Paleo Luna. It's not as scalable as Luna necessarily, and it does do damage once per second every 3 seconds, so it's a little bit slower output, but it's very, very strong. And Deadly Blade Crash is a base game hero. You'll get her in regular missions all the time. It's super easy to obtain her. Same with Assassin Sarah. There's a bit of a clicking bug going on with the game. Sorry about that. Assassin Sarah buffs your damage by 90% in the lead after 5 stacks. So as long as you're laying into a single target or a crowd of enemies, she will constantly be buffing your damage. She is one of the classic commander perks. If you're running her in the lead, great. I don't recommend it because of Luna and her overpoweredness, but if you don't have Luna, then Assassin Sarah is a fantastic pick in the lead, and she's always a good pick in support. Again, whether or not her 22.5% in support is, going to be worth your time, whatever, you will be doing more damage. That's just the basic thing to understand. And Swordmaster Ken is someone that's not going to be super well represented in this video because of the fact that his perk is less than the ladies and only active in Shadow Stance. So 75% is not as impressive as our other picks. 25% in support is pretty good, but it requires Shadow Stance, which happens after you kill an enemy. That's one of the main ninja bonuses. It's not as universal because it's only swords, but we are focusing mainly on swords. So he's a good hero to keep in mind. Definitely good to have on hand, but not always something that makes it into my loadouts. And then finally, I've gone the opposite direction because the rest of this video is going to be about Luna. Paleo Luna adds 9% of your current health to your melee weapon damage. As I've been explaining throughout this video, that does scale beautifully with attack speed, and she's kind of a cheat in that way. I mentioned the way that crit rating works and how the other heroes work because there is a reason to have like a crit build weapon damage loadout. If you're not running Luna. Luna, the way her perk works is you just want to swing as fast as possible. That's why that derpy purple sword from earlier is the highest damage output sword with a Blast from the Past Luna build. And that is unreal to me. But let's just go to a loadout and kind of show how this all pairs together. All right, it's Editing Beast. Just to clarify some things before we start talking about loadouts. First and foremost, what I'm going to begin talking about is a Blast from the Past loadout. And then after that, we're going to transition to the Totally Rockin' Out section. But there are a lot of things to consider. So I'm going to be showing this list quite a few times in the video, and honestly not enough in my opinion, because what I've laid out here are basically the 5 main commanders that you want for melee builds in general, predominantly swords as mentioned. And then we have like my basic script that I kind of just left in here, but we also have the support perks. I'm going to talk about all of these in detail as we go along. This is almost like a Karate Kid kind of video where I'm not going to show you a specific build that works for everything because it doesn't exist, but I'm also going to talk about pretty much every single thing here one at a time so that by the time you get to the end of the video, you're like, oh wait, we're done. We have all the things we need to build our loadouts because I want to talk about the pillars of a build, which are basically optimal damage. You want to be doing as much damage as possible first and foremost. Unfortunately, enemies do try to kill you, so you want to balance that alongside healing. And if the build needs it, you'll need energy because some builds like the Ravager, lunging and attacking enemies, I'll show that clip again later, needs a lot of energy, and that's an extremely important thing to balance out alongside those other pillars. So all of these heroes are going to be what you need to build the optimal loadout depending on what weapon you are using. So what I also want to bring up a bit sooner is the best melees video. That goes over all of the, you're not going to believe this, best melees in Fortnite Save the World, and not every melee is exactly the same. I use the Ravager as reference a lot in this video because A, it has all of like the best perks that I want to show you, and B, it's like the best melee in the entire game, shocker, but there are a lot of really good melees in the game that require different loadouts, and part of that is needing different team perks. So I might flashbang you here. I prefer YouTube light mode. You can fight me, I'm sorry, but because I'm only talking about Blast from the Past and Totally Rockin' Out, I do want to mention that I'm going to link this video down below. I do have a whole video on all of the best team perks in the game. Unfortunately for new players who might not have Blast from the Past or Totally Rockin' Out, there are really only those 2 team perks for like really good melee builds. There are some other team perk options that might be good in the meantime, like Soaring Mantis or whatever. I'm going to link the best team perks video down below just so you can get all those different options and learn what you need to learn. I'm also going to link the yearly timeline down below because this is really, really good for obtaining certain heroes. And finally, I'm also going to link another Google Doc that my friend Matteo made. It basically lists every hero in the game because I didn't didn't want to muddy up all the information in this video by showing you when each and every single hero comes out, because I feel like there's already a lot of information to digest in this video, and you're probably going to watch this multiple times if you're trying to learn Save the World. So the timeline will be down below. If you're trying to get Paleo Luna, because I bring her up a ton in this video, you can just check this and be like, oh, she comes out August 7th. So this will be a super useful resource, and those links will be down there below if you guys want to learn more than what was mentioned in today's video. So Paleo Luna gets her damage from your health. So Blast from the Past is huge. You basically, you don't need it for Luna. She's still a great support perk even without it, but even a commander perk, she's great without it, but you really want Blast from the Past to have as much health as possible. And then your support perks are pretty limited. Let me actually go to this section here. Iza is fantastic. She just makes you stronger. You take less damage. Armor is a universal perk, and especially with melees, when you are up in the fight, there might be acid pools, you might be getting hit from all angles. Very, very useful to have Saurian Hide. I typically have the descriptions off, but I feel like for this video it might be helpful. A lot of newer players are likely watching this, so then there aren't that many options. Saurian Fight is irrelevant in this video because we're buffing melee damage output by a lot, and it's really important to remember these things. So, the pillars of a good loadout have great damage output, optimal damage output, and sufficient healing. And I do use the word sufficient very specifically, meaning as long as you stay alive, you're good. You're good. And we'll talk about how to do that later on. And then the third one is kind of like the and why. When it comes to the vowels of the alphabet, A, E, I, O, and U, I had to pause the editing there because I forgot them. I'm sorry. It's been a while since I was in first grade, but then it's sometimes why. And that's what I'm talking about, where the third pillar is sometimes energy generation. And that's what I was going to bring up here is I'm using Saurian Vigor because in this specific loadout, I don't remember what weapon I was using, but it wasn't the Storm King's Ravager. The Storm King's Ravager has a lunging attack when you jump and right click, and it has a ranged attack when you're just on the ground. That takes a good amount of energy, and having Fossil Southian support is fantastic. So that 4 energy per second will keep that very, very active. Super good to have. But if you're using a sword of melee that doesn't need energy, he is completely wasted. And while Saurian Vigor in the current state of the game sucks, this 2.125% every 5 seconds is disastrous. It takes like 4 minutes to get you to full. It is a very, very bad perk, and the coconuts will underscore that later on. It's still something. It's still more useful than energy we're not using, so like I begrudgingly put it on here, but I'm not thrilled about it. Saurian Instinct is potentially even better. I mean, pop a smoke bomb or a kunai and you might heal yourself, but that's up to you. That's up to you. And then Saurian Might is completely useless because we're not using ranged weapon damage. So that's the basics for Blast from the Past. That's it. That's all of the team perk covered. From there, it's kind of your choice. So let's talk about Assassin Sarah because we've already brought her up. Great support perk. Depending on the weapon that you're using, like you might have seen earlier, my Ravager is triple attack speed with 1 crit damage perk. That is specifically spec'd to have anatomy lessons and support. She brings the crit chance up so much that I can even show you the weapon. If we go to the schematic that I'm sometimes using, you can see that is the wrong, see, I'm telling you, that clicking bug. It is 32.5%. That's pretty dang good for having all the attack speed needed for Luna's juicy damage output and enough of a crit chance from support, Whiteout Fiona and support, that we can just have a crit damage perk on here. Some people opt to run maybe a damage perk instead of crit damage, and then you can have the Assassin Sarah in support, or even Ken. Both of those are pretty good options, but it's important to remember that the damage perk isn't that good, because when you're running triple attack speed on your melees, your damage output from that weapon is quite low. So in that instance, it doesn't really make sense to buff your melee weapon in any amount of damage, and I actually want to move on to my final perk down here just to underscore that. So I'm skipping Battle Beat because she just increases your attack speed, great for Luna, and your damage, which is great for in every use case. I'm going to go all the way down here to go in Coconuts. So I have a chart here that has listed a bunch of different support perks. You don't need to pause for this, but I wanted to mention a few options. So I mentioned the core pillars of a good build is great damage output, good damage output, sufficient healing, and then energy if applicable. And I wanted to keep repeating that because Breakbeat Wildcat is great for support damage. She's awesome. Varsity Hero does the same thing. I can actually show him just to give the newbie players perhaps more information. Varsity Hero drops footballs that activate the Rockin Riff, which is basically the same thing as her, but you kind of have to run over the footballs. You're a little bit more exposed in the fight. I prefer Battle Beat because it just activates from the kills that you're trying to get anyway. It's a little bit more natural for me. And then there are perks related to healing. So Survival Survivalist is one of the only soldiers that is actually really useful in, you know, ninja loadouts, because Survivalist healing you is great. But Survivalist healing is really bad. It's really, really slow. And that is where you might want to consider something like Arlene Iza. She increases life leech basically based on how much health you're missing, and that life leech does scale with how much damage you're doing with your melee. So if you're running like a triple attack speed build like a Luna build, you might not want to run Monster Smash in the support. And that's why I wanted to talk about coconuts, because you might have noticed we have support perks, we have damage perks. Coconuts buff damage and healing. That is really, really strong. I've talked about coconuts in like every video ever because I have stated this many times and I will stand by it. I do believe, this is my opinion, it is the best support perk in the game because he universally buffs damage, melee. I'm pretty sure this buffs ability damage. It will make your minigun do more damage. It does. It increases your melee, your range weapon damage, everything. It's just great. It's just great. And it heals you by around 30% instantly. So if you have over 1 million health in your squad, it'll just give you 300k. It's that easy. And then it heals you over 30 seconds at a speed that is faster than 2 max perk campfires. It's way too powerful. And going further than that, we now have a utility slot. So you can use coconuts and 3 weapons, which is just fantastic. Really, really strong. Now, I brought up coconuts in this roundabout way to mention that if you're running a different loadout, perhaps you want to run a crit build on your melee and you don't want to go all attack speed with like Luna, you might want to consider something like Deadly Blade Crash in the lead, or Assassin Sarah, or even Whiteout Fiona in the lead could be good. She'll make you crit very, very often. All of these are great options. If you're doing something like that, where you're speccing into a weapon that has like damage perks on it and not just attack speed, this could be a situation where you might want Monster Smash. Maybe you're somebody who really doesn't like hunting for coconuts. Trust me, I know how it feels. In fact, I've been using it less often lately just out of comfort because searching coconuts can be really, really bad. It can take a while. It's annoying. Slows the mission down. If you're speedrunning, it's not fun. So Monster Smash can actually heal you sufficiently if you're doing enough damage with your weapon. Now, that is where best perks come into play. I mean, they've been in play this whole time. I have best perks on like every melee. I should have linked this sooner, but I have a video on the best melees. Link to that down below. Pretty sure the description of that video is loaded with links to other melees as well. That would be a great resource because, like I've been saying throughout this video, your ninja loadout is sculpted kind of around and with the weapon you want to use. So that's where things can get very, very hairy, but I'm going to try to simplify as much as possible. And one more final mention before we move on to totally rocking out stuff is the edge case where if you're using axes, you might want Dennis Jr. So he has the Shredder team perk, or I'm sorry, the Shredder support perk. He actually activates the totally rocking out team perk. We'll get to that in a second. He basically makes it that axe eliminations make you, swing faster, do more damage. The same deal Rockin' Riff is giving you with battle beats. So totally rocking out is something I'm going to admit right now I am not an expert on. Totally rocking out has never been super favorable for me as a melee build because while you are outputting tons of damage, you can be fairly frail. In fact, in this loadout I've shown here, your only healing source is activating totally rocking out, and it's not a ton of health and it's not super consistent. So in this build, because you're doing so much damage output, I threw this together, by the way. This is not a best build. If you're watching, you're listening to this right now, we can all smirk for those people who paused the video here and then left, because this is not exactly what I'd recommend necessarily. I just wanted to show that if you run totally rocking out, you're going to be critting a lot. So it buffs your crit rating by a lot. Remember, as I explained earlier, crit rating by 160 is not as impressive as it sounds. In fact, because I have anatomy lessons in here, it's really 175. At its peak, it'll be giving you a nearly 59% crit chance, which is pretty damn good. That is a lot. That is a lot. You'll be critting probably 70% of the time with this build as is at full stack of totally rocking out. And that's amazing. You'll be doing so much damage that you might want to just remove Assassin Sarah or something and put on Monster Smash. This will probably keep you in the fight. And this build can be very, very good. You might want to swap this around. Instead of Fumble, you might want Wafers. I don't necessarily love Wafers because going from that back to a melee is a little annoying, and because you're in the fight, killing the enemies right in front of you where they might be dropping footballs, you might just want to keep Fumble and Battle Beat as they are. That could work completely fine, but this build has a lot of variants. Saurian Claws gives you damage based on health, and you're not going to have nearly as much health in this build. In fact, it's quite a significant amount less. So Luna might not be perfect, but you can kind of work this to whatever you need to be. In fact, if being flimsy is not something you enjoy, a universal hero that works in every loadout is Bomb Suit Kyle, or Bomb Squad Kyle. So he just increases your armor by 22. He's basically like Iza, but 33% less, and works no matter what. So you don't need Blast from the Past, you'll just take less damage. It could be a really nice support perk to have. He is kind of in the face of what I said earlier, where your pillars are damage, healing, sufficient healing, and energy if applicable. In this build, you're not going to be able to get much energy at all. There's nothing in here generating energy. So if you are trying to get energy, there are heroes in the game like Fallen Love Ranger Jonesy, where he gives you energy for kills. Great hero, by the way. Available with the Valentine's set. And that's where I don't want to recommend Bomb Squad Kyle, because while it's great to stay alive, you're going to lose a whole support perk. So you're either losing out on energy or extra damage. You are giving up something in that spot. But when you're running a totally rocking out build, you are doing way more damage. In fact, as I've been mentioning with triple attack speed with Paleo Luna, if you're running totally rocking out, you kind of want triple crit damage, which is possible on the Storm King's Ravager. I keep showing the Ravager, by the way, because it's the best melee in the game, and it has all the perks that are relevant to what I'm talking about. There are, as I mentioned with the best melees video, tons of options. Pretty much everything I have 130, not everything, but pretty much everything here can be viable with the right loadout. It's just that the Ravager is a really nice template to show all the different perks that can make these builds awesome. I just wanted to clarify that. It's not the only melee in the game, and I'm well aware of that. So triple crit damage is what you want if you're running a totally rockin' out build, because all that crit rating should come from your team perks. So yeah. Hopefully this wasn't wildly confusing. I'm certain it was, because something that I liked with my old video is, look at the state of this, okay? Coming back to this old video, look at how few ninjas there were. I have to scroll down to show all the ninjas in the game now. It used to be so simple. There used to be no totally rocking out. There used to be none of this monster smash Iza giving you health on. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. In fact, I had to do, like I said, I had to write down all these notes just to formulate this video, because I haven't thought seriously about ninja loadouts in years, and I'm really hoping that this cleared everything up. I'm well aware that I didn't cover everything. There are lots of little edge cases. Like if you really like Dragon Slash or something, you can put Dragon Scorch in support and whatever, but I feel like that flies in the face of my focus, where if you're running Dragon Slash, it should have its own loadout. That's what the link in the description is for. You should be focusing on damage, sufficient healing, you know, just enough to keep alive. That's why coconuts are kind of insane. And from there, you should be very effective in your games. Thank you guys so much for watching. I, as of recording this, know how much editing I have ahead of me, and you know, I appreciate you guys making it to the end. I'm no grief if you have to rewatch this multiple times. This is a ton of information, especially for a new player. Comment down below if you have any questions. I'll see you guys next time, and yeah, take it easy. And then